tonight we have Mary Walby joining us from the great state of Washington. Mary is the founder of God's Window Senior Horse Rehab and has spent the past 15 years rehabilitating senior equines from a holistic management perspective. She also consults with owners on senior horse topics, including maintaining weight, arthritis management, dental care, diarrhea fixes, and more. Today, Mary will touch on her experiences throughout the years caring for senior horses well into their mid and late 30s. We are so happy to have you, Mary, and please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here and share this information. I started rehabbing senior horses by accident about 20 years ago, and I saw horses in a therapy environment. They started to get older, they started to retire, and they started to burn out a little bit. And it was like, okay, it's clear these horses need to retire. And I got more curious about the horses than the people. So people were being helped, and I thought, you know what? I really want to help the horses. Like, what do they need in their senior years? What do they need to thrive? And I thought, why can't a senior horse thrive to the day they die? Why can't they be full of life to the day they die? Why do they have to wither away, look old, can't move? Like, does that really have to be like that? And so I took in my first senior horse, and he came to me at 26 years old. They were talking about euthanizing him because he was so unhappy. He had a hard time maintaining weight. He was just a crabby horse at that point. And I looked at him and I thought, if I changed your living environment, maybe change your food a little bit, I'm wondering, would that sort of bring you out of this funk you're in? And so I wanted to try it and find out. So I took him in and I put him on acreage in a herd. I changed his diet to forage based only. And lo and behold, he came back to life. And then he lived another 12 years, like 12. And he was the leader of his herd to the day he died at 38 years old. And he was in excellent health. And it was just eye opening to me that, oh, this is what a fully alive senior horse looks like. And so then I began taking in other horses with different issues. And each one of them taught me about what senior horses need to thrive. So what I'll be talking about today is just what I've learned about senior horses. And I'm going to be talking about the ideal, but I also realize not everyone has the ideal available to them. And so how can you still implement some of the ideas even if your situation is not ideal? So sometimes we don't always have what we want. We don't always necessarily even have what we need, but we can still make changes on a small scale that can help support the thriving of our senior horses. So the question I like to ask everyone is, what brings you to the webinar? Like, why do you want to hear about senior horses? I mean, a lot of times people don't usually go out looking for senior horses and then I want a horse and I go get a senior. Usually someone's looking for a horse because they want to learn how to ride, or they want to do eventing, or there's something they want to do with the horse. But all horses get older and all of them hit their senior years. And the question becomes, what do we do when they go to their senior years? So for me, I just wanted to know about senior horses. So I take in seniors. I don't want a young horse. I want an old one. And then I want to learn from them. So different reasons why people have senior horses. Some decide, this horse has served me their whole life. I want to take care of it until it dies. And I don't want it to get passed off to someone else. I want to take that responsibility for the whole life of the horse if I can. And so that brings a whole new set of issues when the horses get older, because they don't chew as well. They don't move as well. All sorts of things where it would be no big deal if I did this when they're, say, 10 years old. All of a sudden for a senior, they can't do it. Then they start having diarrhea. Like, now what do I do? So there's all sorts of things that will happen with senior horses. And then I'll talk about some of the big things that I learned with the horses that I took care of. So I am going to, let's see. So this is Care of the Senior Horse, this webinar. And my organization where I post all my information is God's Window Senior Horse Rehab. And let's see. So this is a senior horse I had. I'm going to share a video. So it will take me just a moment to bring it up. Okay, so this is a video of one of the first senior horse I took in, the one I took in when he was 26. So We're going to watch this video, and I'm curious for all of you to guess at home, how old do you think this horse is in this video? So you know he's at least 26 because I took him in at 26. But here he is. It's about a 20-second clip. Share that because I may not have. No, I did optimize. Yay, I did optimize the sound. Okay, let's watch one more time. I just love watching this horse run. Am I sharing? Yes. Okay. So that little buck he throws, he would do that when he was very happy, when he just felt good in his body. And this horse is in his mid-30s, probably around 34, 35 is when this happened. And he lived to 38, pretty much in this condition all the way to 38. Okay, so I'm going to go back to presentation. Take me just a moment to bring it up. Okay. Okay. I think, is that back, Rachel?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so here he is bucking. So he's in his mid-30s, probably 34, 35 in this. But he lived out in this about an 8-acre pasture with other horses, and he was free to come and go as he pleased. We had a shelter, and so he always had food in him of some kind. And so that kept his gut moving. And because he moved all day, that also kept his gut moving. So it was, I think the only colic episodes I ever had was the first year I had him in that transitionary period, which can happen with seniors when you're changing things. And then I didn't have another colic episode till 12 years later, right before he died. So, but I credit that to he was out all the time. He was moving with other horses all the time, and he always had access to food. So those things can really cut down on the colic incidences. It doesn't necessarily completely eliminate them, but movement and food in the gut, those two things are tied to the digestion of a horse. And when they have both those things, the incidence of colic is less. Okay. So in this webinar, we're going to talk about what do senior horses need to thrive, how to maintain the health, how to maintain weight, arthritis. I'll touch a little bit about hospice care at end of life. It's a viable option, and also about how to deepen our relationship with our senior horses. Okay, so in the big picture, what do senior horses need to thrive? Freedom, so freedom of movement, forage, so forage-based food, so plants. And so whether that's pasture, it's hay. And then when you get into horses that can't chew hay anymore, I go into soaked hay pellets that we'll talk about later. And then also they need friends. So horses are social animals. And if they are living alone, they have a higher cortisol level in their body, and that's the stress hormone. So we may not visibly see it, but the way it will show up is they'll have digestive issues. If they live in a stall, they might start weaving. It just, when you can't quite put your finger on it, something's off about this horse. I look at the environment they're living in and I go, how can I increase the movement? How can I increase the variety of forage they eat? How can I increase the social interaction? So a wild horse will travel 20 miles in a day. They'll eat up to 25 different plants, including woody plants, and they live in a herd. So they have friends. They also have protection in a herd. And so anything I can do to increase the movement, increase the variety of forage, and increase their social interaction with other horses, that's what I'm trying to do. So regardless of what living environment my horse is in or how I might be limited that way, I'm looking for ways to increase the movement, the variety of forage, and the social interaction. So my preference is to have the horse live in a herd on acreage. That's ideal. And then I don't have to take care of anything. I just go let them be a horse, and they take care of their own movement. They take care of eating their own food. And my workload is pretty low. Now, if I want to increase variety of the forage, then I might go for walks through the woods where I let them eat other plants. And one of my horses, after a windstorm, we have Douglas fir trees in this area. And after a windstorm, there'd be branches laying on the ground. And I kid you not, he picked one up and he ate it, like the whole branch. It was about like a foot long. And I watched him eat this and I thought, okay, I've seen you eat other plants. I've never seen you eat a tree branch. And then I later found out the properties of the tree branch, which were actually medicinal for him. So I love grazing walks through the woods and watching what plants the horses eat. And then I go research the plants, and it tells me a little bit about what's going on with my horse. So sometimes they'll seek out medicinal plants. Sometimes I had one horse, he ate dandelion all the time. Anytime we went on a walk through the woods, it was always eating dandelions. And I thought, okay, what's the deal with the dandelions? Because my other horses they'd eat it occasionally, but not for just several minutes. So I researched dandelions, and it's a liver detoxer. And this horse did that when he first came to me. And so I thought, okay, this is part of you rehabbing your own body. But in whatever you do with your horses, when you can take them for walks where they get to eat other plants, that's a great way to have a deeper understanding of them. And say you don't have a place where you can go for a walk through the woods, you can plant your own little herb garden. So you can get your own herbs and grow them in pots. And then say you take your horse for a walk on the property, and before you go put them back in their paddock or wherever they live, you can stop by the little herb garden and let them choose which ones they want to take a bite of. You can also go to an herb store and get herbs in little packets and put them in your pockets. And when you go out to see your horse, you can let them sniff each of them and see which one they want. So that's just a simple way to have more variety in their diet. A lot of times horses will have one hay all year, but really their guts are designed for multiple kinds of hay or multiple kinds of plants and woody plants and herbs and things like that. Okay, and then also, how do you increase the social interaction? So one is they live in a herd. Two, you can have outings with other friends with horses, so they get to be with other horses. Another thing that I did with one of my horses is he came to me, and when we go for a walk down the road, it was out in the country. And if we went to the left, there was a horse that lived down that street. If we went to the right, there were a couple horses living down the other street. So we got to the top of the driveway and let him pick, well, which way you want to go? You want to go right or left? And he chose to go right. I go, okay, well, then let's go right. And so we walked down that road. And when we got to the neighboring horses, he stopped there to say hi to them. And so I thought, okay, great. So we'll hang out with these horses. And then, after several minutes, he decided, okay, I'm going to turn around and go back home. So he turned around. We all went back home, except that he didn't go home. He passed home and then went down the other street to visit the other horse that lived in the neighborhood, that lived alone. And so then we spent time down there with that horse, said hello to that horse. And then when he was all done visiting the horses of the neighborhood, then he turned around and walked home, and we all walked home with him. So that was an example of just increasing the social interaction, but that was sort of his choice. He wanted to visit the horses in the neighborhood. So there's just many ways, creative ways you can think of to increase the social interaction for your senior horses. Okay, so this here is a picture of one of the wooded trails by the property where I kept my horses. And this section of trail, there was no way out. So I just took the halters off and let them go in there and eat. All they did was eat and choose plants and walk down the path. And I at one point counted how many different plants this horse had access to over the course of a year, and it got pretty close to 20. I was seeing if I could get to 25, just to have the variety in the diet, because the more variety, it just the healthier they will be. Okay, so that brown horse who was grazing that path right there in the previous slide, here he is the day I picked him up. He's 26 years old in this photo. And this is the diet he was fed prior to coming to me. So he had three scoops of soaked beet pulp. And beet pulp, a lot of times people will feed for fiber, and that's not a bad thing. Fiber is good for a horse. He had a scoop of soaked alfalfa cubes. Then he had a few scoops of senior horse feed, and the senior horse feed was grain-based. And then in my state, Washington, the west side of the state is very wet and mild. And so hay does not grow well here. It's like we do not have enough sunny days in the summertime to really be able to grow quality hay. So local Western Washington hay nutritionally is lacking significantly in protein and other nutrients. And then he also had some pasture turnout in the summertime. Okay, so that's what he came with. And this was his condition when he came. He also was a 24/7 chronic cribber. So he would eat his senior horse feed for about 10 minutes and then go crib. And it turned out that's what was causing the cribbing, because his body couldn't handle the grain. So what I did with him when he came to me was I took out the local Western Washington hay because nutritionally there wasn't enough nutrients in it for him. And I replaced it with hay from Eastern Washington, which is a much better place for growing hay. And their hay had a better nutritional profile, more adequate protein and nutrients. So I got rid of the senior horse feed because it's grain-based, and horses are not designed for grain. I mean, back in the day, when in the 1800s, you're sweating all day, you're hauling logs, and you need a burst of energy, then maybe grain might be appropriate. But for a senior horse, and really for any horse, grain digests too quickly, and it gets to the hindgut and disrupts the gut flora in the hindgut, and then puts it out of balance, and then all sorts of other problems start to crop up. So I took out the senior horse feed because I wanted to know, what if I just feed you quality hay, give you a mineral supplement? Will that be enough to bring back your condition? That was my question. I also took the beet pulp out. I thought, let's see if we need the beet pulp. Let me see if I can do this with just hay alone. And if I need more help, then I might come back to the beet pulp. But initially, I took the beet pulp out. Now, I didn't keep the alfalfa cubes, but I did add 1 or 2 pounds of alfalfa. So that's what I did with him. And then here's what happened. So I started that immediately. I changed his diet. And then here's what he looked like at age 32. Now, it probably took about a good year for him to sort of recalibrate his body. And then in the second year, he really started to come into his own. And then by the third year, he's like a brand new horse. And this is the diet here that I fed him during all that time. So I did 20 pounds of Timothy orchard grass from Eastern Washington, which had a better nutritional profile. I did 2 pounds of Eastern Washington alfalfa hay. I did it partly for the variety in the diet and also because of the protein. I had him turned out on the pasture 24/7. Now, sometimes in the springtime, if the grass was too rich, in that part where it's totally new spring grass, I might have limited his grass intake. So part of the day I had a big sacrifice area where he still could move and eat hay, but I did limit grass in those transitionary periods a little bit. I did a mineral supplement. Sometimes it's referred to as a ration balancer, where it's simply the nutrients needed to make up for whatever is deficient in the diet. So no hay in my state has selenium at all. Like, we are in selenium deficient place. And so selenium is one of the things I supplemented. Just a note about selenium: if you overdose selenium, you will kill the horse. So you want to be very aware of what you're doing with selenium. So if you do have selenium in your soil, you probably don't want to be supplementing it. But I'll say this: whatever you do with selenium, talk to a veterinarian, a nutritionist, just to make sure you don't make a mistake, because horses have been killed, unfortunately, because they had too much selenium.
I will jump in here. Our main soils and therefore forage are also deficient in selenium.
Okay, great.
But
Okay,
yes,
thank
definitely
you.
definitely talk to a nutritionist or a vet.
Yes, yes. So then the other thing I did with him was during the non-growing season. So during the winter time when there's not much as much grass happening, I supplemented omega-3 fatty acids. And so that can be like ground flax, or it can be flax oil, maybe just like a tablespoon or two a day. And that was his diet. And then this is what he looked like. This was in the summertime. And it was just like, my gosh, look at you. Even if I'm doing this, I look at him and I go, that's just amazing. Like, and at this point, he's no longer cribbing. Like that resolved once the grain left, and once nutritionally he had what he needed. And now he could be out with other horse friends, and he was out all the time and had more freedom. And that just went away. Okay. So here's this is the second horse that came to me. And the initial thing that you might notice right off the bat is the withdrawn eyes on the left. And then on the right side, his eyes are big and round and he's more engaged. And so when he came to me, he was burned out completely, and he wanted a lot of space. He didn't like people touching him. And I think he just been touched one too many times. And he had come out of a therapy program, and he was a rock solid horse for several years, and he helped a lot of kids. But what I realized happened was that they didn't know how to read the eyes of a horse. So I just want to talk about the eyes of a horse for just a moment, because if we can understand about the eyes of the horse, we can make slight changes in our body language that will communicate to them that we see them. So I heard one person say, we can, just by saying hello to a horse, I get on the property, I walk straight to them, I touch them, I hug them, I kiss them. And depending upon the horse, it's possible to have walked through like 3 boundaries the horse had and not even know it. And so I just want to give an example of this. So here's my next slide. Okay, so the horse on the left, this is what I call the fixed eye. And to me, it means no. Like if you're approaching a horse and their eyes fixed, don't keep going. Just stop where you are. And you might even not even just stop, but stop and then back up and keep backing up until their eyes blink. And that tells you how much space they feel comfortable with. So as a human being, if I meet someone for the first time, I just don't go walk over them, hug them, kiss them. And I mean, that would just be so bizarre. And the other person would be so uncomfortable in my presence. So, and horses are similar. They really tolerate a lot from us and give us a lot of leeway because they realize we're not a horse and don't know these things. So, but when you can start recognizing the fixed eye, and then don't keep going with whatever you're doing, but maybe stop and back up and keep backing up until the eye blinks, and then wait right there. They will sometimes then come around because they go, oh, she sees me. Okay. Okay. Now, okay. So I know if I get nervous again and my eyes fix, she's going to see that. So she won't just keep going. So I found that when I started paying attention to the eyes and waiting for the green light before I approached further, that they really there was a deeper relationship that happened between us. And it was new to me. So the horse on the right, he's giving me 2 eyes. They're round, they're soft. This is a photo, so you can't see them blink, but they're soft and he blinks. They're not this fixed look. So the one on the right, when I see that, and I'm approaching a horse and I see that, I keep going. I go, oh yeah, I'll come right into your presence. This is the invitation. Oh yes, come on right over. But this photo on the left, Dad's like, yeah, don't come any closer. And the reason this horse was glaring at me like that was because I was taking his photo and he didn't like cameras. I think he didn't like them because I wasn't fully present. I'm busy trying to take his photo. And so internally, I'm a little bit different. And so that's where that came from. Okay. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is, so this is the second horse that came to me with the withdrawn eyes. The other thing he came with was chronic diarrhea. So you'll see down his hocks that it's all dirty there. So when he passed manure, he had brown liquid coming out. The manure balls, yeah, they're sort of there, but it was diarrhea. And they had vet care. So it's not like the previous owner was totally asleep on the job. They had a vet come out. They were trying all sorts of things, trying to figure it out. And when they asked me to consider taking this horse, I thought, well, let me just do a Google search on diarrhea in horses and what can I find out? And what I found out was one of the leading causes of diarrhea in a horse is they can't chew hay anymore. So what happens when you can't chew hay is that pieces of hay that are not chewed will get to the colon and it will irritate the colon. And so then when the fecal balls are pooped out, there's an uptake of liquid in that part of the body in a healthy horse. But in a horse that has hay irritating the colon because the hay is not chewed, it can't uptake the liquid. And so it comes pouring out. So the good news is that this is totally resolvable. In fact, this resolved in 48 hours. And so I'm going to tell you how we did that. Okay, so I took him to an equine dentist who was his specialty was dentistry, and he had education beyond vet school, and he made his career out of staying on top of the latest developments in equine dentistry. So I highly recommend taking your seniors to an equine dentist. I even recommend taking your pre-seniors to an equine dentist, because what happened with this horse was his teeth were completely worn out, and they were starting to fall out. And so he had no more grinding surface. So in a horse, they have molars on the top and the bottom of their jaw, and it's a grinding surface. But in worn out teeth, the molars will become what's called cupped out. So they're no longer flat on top. They're little, it's indentations. So you can't actually grind food anymore. And so then that's where your hay doesn't get fully chewed. The other thing that will start to happen is they'll have, they can have uneven wear patterns in their teeth when they chew. And so you'll get what's called a wave, where some teeth get worn down, other ones don't. And so if it gets out of balance, they can actually start to pull their own teeth out. They don't mean to, but because the wear pattern's off, then, and it's not even, then they can actually pull out their own teeth. And that's what happened with this horse. So when I took him to the dentist, I remember him telling me this, and he said, I'm very disappointed. He said, this is entirely 100% preventable. This horse is 27. And he said, 10 years ago, I could have done something about this. 10 years ago, I could have corrected the wear pattern, just a little touch up each year to keep it from getting out of control to the point where he's losing his teeth and he can't chew hay. So he said, anything you can do in their teens to just have a dentist take a peek at the teeth and just make sure there's not uneven wear patterns where they're going to start pulling their own teeth out by the time they're 27. So so then the question became, okay, what do I feed you? Hay makes diarrhea, and that's not good for you. So I went to feeding soaked hay pellets or cubes. And with him, the hay pellets worked so well, I just stayed with that. And so I found Timothy hay pellets, I found orchard grass hay pellets, and then I found alfalfa pellets. And so I fed about 1% of his body weight in the pellets. And in terms of the alfalfa, I went about 2 pounds a day. And so it was just like I was feeding him hay, except it soaked hay pellets. So I split this into feedings, and I weigh the feed. So I look at a horse, and if the horse, say he's 1,000 pounds, a horse will maintain their weight on roughly 1% to 2% of their body weight. That's just a rough guideline. And so then with him, I go, okay, 1% of your body weight, if you're 1,000 pounds, that's 10 pounds. So, okay, then if how about I do 8 pounds of the orchard Timothy pellets, and then I'll do 2 pounds of alfalfa. Okay, then I'll split it up into 2 feedings. That's 5 pounds each feeding. ideally, if I could do a third feeding, then I would go 3 pounds like that each feeding. I like 3 better because they can digest that and not eat too much. This horse was good at self-monitoring, so I could feed him 5 pounds. And then after about an hour, he goes, okay, I'm done. I'm just going to go take a nap for a bit. And then an hour later, he would come back and finish it. So he monitored that himself. If a horse eats too much pellets, say at 10 pounds of pellets, and they won't stop eating, they will get sick. They just, you can tell in their body like something's off, something's not right about you. I've known some horses, depending upon their size, where they can handle 5 pounds. And I know some horses who don't self-monitor very well. So it's just something to consider if you do go into needing to feed hay pellets or cubes, to split it into feeding so that they don't overwhelm their body. But also note, if the horse is good at self-monitoring, then you can take that into account as well. Also with pellets and cubes, I fully soak them till they're completely broken down. And the reason I do this is because I had 2 choking incidences. One was on dry pellets, and another was on pellets that were soaked for 20 minutes, where there was still some firmness in it. And with a horse who can't chew, well, they can't chew pellets either. So, and if the teeth are really worn out, they can't grind it at all. So if it goes down the wrong way, now you have a choking incident. So once I went to fully soaking the pellets or cubes, I never had a choke incident again, ever, like 0. So I highly recommend soaking fully. And if you're soaking hay pellets or cubes and you're in warm weather, refrigeration is really nice. You can just get your bucket, put in the water, add the pellets, put it in the refrigerator, and then it's ready to go when you go to feed. I did write an article on feeding pellets and soaking them and all the nitty-gritty details. So if you want more on that, it's available on the resource page on my website. Okay, so the bottom line here, the reason this horse has no diarrhea is because he had no access to hay, none. And then I replaced the hay with soaked hay pellets or cubes. Okay. The other thing that happens when a horse can't chew hay anymore, and you have to go to soaked hay pellets or cubes, the feed bill will double. So I sort of had to come to terms with the fact that this horse at 27 couldn't eat hay anymore, and that it was preventable. And I would have much rather had paid for his dental care for the past 10 years, once a year, than to have an ongoing feed bill every month that's double my other horse. So if at all possible, to provide the dental care in their teens yearly, even though sometimes it's expensive, it will save your horse's teeth. And then you can have a senior horse who can still eat hay. And it's less work for us when they can eat hay. And it's easier on them because I can just put hay in the field and here, go nibble it whenever you want. And so with him, I had to manage a little bit more because if he got a hold of hay, he'd have diarrhea. So highly recommend the equine dentist to maintain the teeth so that they can be a senior horse and they can chew hay. So that's my ideal, but sometimes we don't always get ideal, and that's okay too. And in that case, the hay pellets and cubes will work really well for a senior. Okay. This horse, this is the one from the video. This is him just before his 38th birthday. And he's still a leader of his herd right here. And probably in the last year of his life, maybe in the last couple of years, I started adding maybe a couple pounds of soaked hay pellets to his diet. Just, some in the morning and in the evening, because I go, are you starting to lose a little weight, or you're not quite as, the condition is it's entering my mind that it might be waning a little bit. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to wait till you get skinny. I'm going to go, oh, here, let me just give you a couple pounds of soaked hay pellets every day and see what happens. And then he maintained his body like this. So it's something you just keep monitoring the horse. And if you start to notice them starting to lose a little bit of weight, or it's like, am I starting to feel the ribs? If that is a new thought coming in your head, then maybe add a pound or two of soaked hay pellets to their diet and see over the course of, a couple of weeks if you notice a change. And the last probably 6 months of his life, I started doing maybe up to half of his diet in hay and half in soaked hay pellets. And I did those in multiple feedings. And then he was able to maintain his weight beautifully. So soaked pellets and cubes, because they're sort of pre-chewed in a sense, they have a higher feed utilization. So the horse will gain weight. So if you have a fat horse, don't feed them soaked hay pellets because they'll get fatter. But if you have an underweight horse or one who has trouble maintaining their condition, I highly recommend soaked hay pellets or cubes because they are forage. It's just chewed up hay, and it's in a form that they can actually utilize when their teeth might be wearing out. Okay, here's the next slide. So for all of my horses, the big question I was asking was, what do you need to thrive as a senior horse? And really trying to pare down and go, here, you're a horse. Okay, what do you really need? And then see what happens with the body. And then if they need any help in there, then I would give them help. But I didn't want to assume they needed the help. And one place where I didn't want to assume they needed help was with blankets. So I thought, okay, let me feed you really well, have good nutrition, have access to forage, space to move, friends to hang out with. You get to come and go as you please. You get to make your own decisions. And in all of that, how are you doing in wintertime? Like, do you need any help in wintertime? And what I found was that this horse is, he's, I don't know how old he is in this one. He might be 30, 35 in here. And his hair staying on the end, and that's how it traps heat. So he's quite happy. He's very warm. He has access to food. Even with the snow, there was hay. And so the food, him chewing hay, is how he generates heat. And then the hair is designed to stand on end. So that's how it traps the heat in cold weather. I also make sure I provide a shelter. So if they want to come in out of the elements, they can. But I really try to let them decide that rather than me decide that. And a horse that's in good health, even a senior, they will thermoregulate their body beautifully, even in cold weather, and they will do it way better than I ever could. So for me, I never ended up with blankets. I do keep a blanket on hand for an emergency. And I think this horse probably had a blanket on him for the space of a couple hours in the 11 years he was with me during an emergency. And then the emergency passed. It was like, okay, we're done with that now, and you can go back to being a horse. So I don't like to assume that because a horse is old, they need a blanket. I'd like to assume what you need to thrive. What am I feeding you? How can I help you maintain your weight? How can I optimize the nutrition for you? And then see what happens. And then if something happens and then you need a blanket, well, then by all means, pull it out. But I found with these seniors, they did really well, and I never needed to use a blanket because I was worried about them being cold. Okay, so this is just a couple things to note about blankets, because anytime we do something, a human thing for the horse, there can be unintended consequences we don't know about. And blankets, so if you put a blanket on, blankets are made for different temperatures. And some people are in parts of the country where you can have a wild fluctuation in temperature. You can go from the 70s down to the 30s in the space of 24 hours. Okay, if you're at the 70s, you don't need a blanket. If you're at the 30s and you have blanketed, then that's a blanket. So it's coming off on, if you really are paying close attention to the weather, the temperature outside, and if I am the horse, what am I doing in this? It's high maintenance for the caretaker. So it's just more work for us to keep track of what the temperature is. The other thing is that a horse can only regulate its whole body. It can't regulate just this part and maybe just warm up that part. So with this horse, he can't just warm up his neck, but not the rest of him. The whole thing, he has to do the whole thing. And this next piece about losing muscle tone, when I discovered this, I thought, oh my gosh, the tail flap. So you can see it on this blanket here. Because it limits the movement of the tail, it will actually then start to atrophy the muscles. And then because of that, you can actually have horses that have more difficult time getting up and down. And what senior do you know? I mean, it's common that seniors have difficulty. Some do getting up and down. And then my next question is, who has a tail flap on their blanket? Because it's starting to atrophy the muscles. So this is why I really try to stay away. If I need something, I will definitely use it. But I consider these things. And then ultimately, a blanket, the horse's hair cannot stand on end in cold weather. And that's how they trap heat. That's how they stay warm while they're also eating forage, which helps generate heat. So the moment the blanket goes on, we've now taken away that mechanism of letting the hair stand on end to trap the heat. So now we become responsible for making sure they're warm enough, which then goes back to monitoring the temperature outdoors, making sure the blanket we have on them is for that temperature range, et cetera, et cetera. So if you need a blanket, please you use the blanket. But these are just things that I've discovered and just want to share so that people are aware of them. And there was one incident where I was taking care of a horse without a blanket, and she was in good health and she had great condition, and she was a senior. And then there was another horse in the field that had a blanket on. And there was one day I thought, I just want to feel how warm is the horse with the blanket and how warm is the horse with no blanket. So I went to the horse with no blanket and put my hand under the front legs where the girth would go. And she felt neutral. She wasn't warm. She wasn't cold. She was can just describe it as neutral. And then I went over to the horse that had the blanket on, felt out the girth, and he was toasty warm. And I thought, wow. And then the next thought in my head was, I'm wondering if you're too warm. That's what entered my mind. Now, it wasn't my horse, so I just left it alone, but I just filed away in my head that we humans love to be toasty warm. If it's cold outside, we want to curl up next to the fireplace, have some cocoa, and be toasty. But a horse out in the elements, they don't need to be toasty. That's actually not what they need. They can just be neutral because their body's regulating to the temperature. And the other thing, this may be obvious, but a horse's entire body is covered in hair and is designed to trap heat in cold. So we don't have a lot of hair in our body compared to a horse. So yes, we're going to be cold and we want blankets and we want to be really warm and toasty on a cold day. But a horse already has a whole set of hair covering every inch of its body and is designed to trap heat and help keep them warm while they're also eating and generating that heat. Okay, so the next thing I'll talk about is managing arthritis. Okay, so arthritis. So these are my top tips for arthritis. Number one, movement. If you can get a senior horse 27 turnout, bulk of your problems are going to go away. Because the moment they get into confinement, they have no wiggle room anymore, and it will just be downhill from there. The other thing is I take grain out of the diet because grain is inflammatory. Arthritis is also an inflammatory condition. And so grain, diet-wise, does not help arthritis. So I like to keep it out of the diet. And ultimately, horses do well on forage, so it's not really required. If you're wanting to feed a mineral supplement, you can get a non-grain-based mineral supplement. I also do omega-3 fatty acids. So if I know a horse has arthritis issues, diet-wise, I supplement omega-3 fatty acids in the non-growing season when there's not much green in the pasture to eat. And in the summertime, they're eating the pasture, and that's where they get the omega-3 fatty acids. But if I know a horse is dealing with arthritis, I will still supplement in the summertime and in the wintertime the omega-3 fatty acids just to help them out because they are anti-inflammatory. I also exercise is wonderful. So taking the horse for a walk, if you still ride the horse, anything to increase the movement. I'll also go to if I still need help. So I do all those things first. And if the horse still needs help, then I'll start looking at a joint supplement. So in terms of joint supplements, I like to go with glucosamine because it helps to repair the joints. Another option is called green-lipped mussel, and that also helps repair the joints. Either one will work. I started with glucosamine, and then the Horse Journal, which is now out of print, but they had mentioned that you need a minimum of 10,000 milligrams per day of glucosamine to make a difference, and it can take up to 3 months to see the difference. So with this horse here, I did glucosamine for 3 months. And then at 3 months, it's like, okay, I think you could still use a little help. So at that point, then I added MSM. And so MSM can help with pain relief. Now, you can also get into pain relieving herbs. There's nothing wrong with them. But the one thing about pain relieving herbs is they can stop working. And I don't like that. So that's why I focused on the glucosamine, see if that supports them, maybe going to MSM to support them further. And with the horses in my care, that was sufficient. So I never really went beyond that. The other thing that really helps them is acupuncture is great for senior horses, body work, just things to help them feel good in their body and keep them moving well. I highly recommend it. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so on the pain relievers. So the herbal ones can stop working. So can pharmaceutical drugs. I prefer not to go pharmaceutical drugs on a chronic condition like arthritis because they will eventually stop working. And when they stop working, then you're wondering what to do, and euthanasia typically follows. So if I need to do pharmaceutical drugs because it's dire, then okay, I'll do it. But I really try to see what else I can do to avoid going there, because the moment I step onto that bandwagon, I know what the end will be, and it will likely be euthanasia. And I really prefer not to have to go that route if I don't have to. So that's why I go with the glucosamine, the MSM, and see if that is enough to help the horse.
Mary, we are about 10 minutes from the hour.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay, so this horse, he lived to 31, almost 31, and it was glucosamine and MSM that increased his comfort as he aged. But it was really the 24/7 turnout. Without that, this would have been a nightmare. I don't know how I would not have done it. If I didn't have a way to turn this horse out all the time, I couldn't have, it would have been way too much emotionally to handle. So 24/7 turnout. And then with that, he needed more support. So I added the glucosamine. And then after 3 months of glucosamine, I go, I think you might need a little bit more. So I added the MSM. And then that is what really helped him be comfortable. Okay, so this horse, back to him again. So he went to 38, leader of the herd. He lived out the 11 years I had him in retirement. He was grain-free that entire time. He had a forage-based diet. He had regular body work. I learned how to do some myself, and that's something we did together. And in the later years, probably the last couple of years, is when I started to supplement with glucosamine. But that was enough. He didn't need more support with the MSM, so I just stayed with that. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to touch on vaccination and worming for just a moment. Number one, educate yourself. Read the fine print. I like to read fine print, and then I read the fine print, and then I start asking the veterinarian questions. With a senior horse, sometimes they fall into the category of compromised health, or when they talk about vaccinating horses and worming them, they're talking about the younger ones. They're talking about the ones in the 20s and 30s. I'm sorry, the 10s and 15-year-olds. Sorry. And that are in good health. They still have energy. But when you start to get older, your body changes. And so those drugs were not tested on seniors necessarily. It was for younger ones that can handle the load of the vaccine or the wormer. So when you have a senior, proceed with caution and just vaccinate as needed and worm as needed with a light hand. don't come at it with the big guns that you might have been able to do with a 10-year-old, because with a senior, it might be too much and they can have reactions. So I like to evaluate the exposure and the risks for each horse on a case-by-case basis. Like for the vaccines, do they ever see any other horses? Is the disease even present in my area? Things like that. Also, 20% of the horses in a herd will carry 80% of the worm burden. So these days, they're starting to identify the horses that carry the worm burden and worm them, but not necessarily automatically worm the other horses. And one other note about vaccinations, that if you do decide to vaccinate, don't do them all at the same time on the same day. It is an onslaught to the horse's body. And in a senior horse, they're older and sometimes they can't handle it. And the people I've known, thankfully, not a lot, but the people I've known where the horse had a severe reaction, it was so traumatic to them, they wish they had just spaced them out. Unfortunately, that's less convenient. And a lot of times veterinarians say, oh, I can just give all 5 vaccines right now. It's like, no, how about we do one? If I decide that I need to vaccinate my horse, then just do one and then wait a couple of weeks and then do the other one. And it gives the horse's body as a senior time to process the vaccination. Too many at one time can overload their system, and they're a senior horse and they don't have as much wiggle room as a younger horse would have. And lastly, tetanus. So tetanus is one of the vaccines, and tetanus lives in the horse's bowel. So they poop a pile, you have tetanus in the environment. And so when you have a puncture wound that is contaminated with tetanus, then that's where you have tetanus become full blown. And tetanus has a high mortality rate. So that's just something to be aware of, that tetanus, of all the vaccinations, tetanus is the one that has my attention the most, where in terms of the risk and exposure, okay, it is present because it lives in the horse's bowel. And that's just the physiology of a horse. So it is normal for tetanus to live in a horse's bowel. It's supposed to live there. But it's something to be aware of, to consider when you decide if you're what and which vaccines are you going to do or not do, and the worming question as well. Okay. So I'm just going to touch briefly on metabolic issues. If you have metabolic issues in your horses, your senior horses, I highly recommend these 2 organizations. One is Alicia Edwards. She addresses it holistically through nutrition and management. She does not go through drugs. She's found a way to pretty much reverse it. And it was so impressive to me. I thought, oh my gosh, if I ever have a horse with any of these conditions, I would totally follow her program, because she has had tremendous success with it. And Calm Healthy Horses, she addresses, this organization addresses grass-affected horses. So when you have a sudden fluctuation in temperatures, where they can go very high and very low, then the grass has sudden growth and then it stops and freezes and it's all over the place. The plant can actually, I can't remember the science of what happens in the plant, but at horses who eat those plants that have been in those sudden fluctuations of temperatures, the horses can become reactive and sometimes dangerous. And you look at your horse, you go, this was a nice horse the other day, and all of a sudden he's like a raging dragon. Like, what happened? It might be a grass-affected horse. And so Calm Healthy Horses deals with that specifically through diet, nutrition, and management. And they've had some wonderful turnarounds to where horses could be sane again. And it was because of what they're eating, because of the weather fluctuations. Okay. So here we are. This is a 3rd horse that came to me. And what she taught me, I never wanted to learn. And what she taught me was about the dying process. She only lived 3 months with me before she died, and she came with significant health issues. And so when she died, I did euthanize her, but she didn't want to go. And I was just going, I don't get this. Like, there's pain going on, but there's this sense of she's wanted to stay. She fought the euthanasia. I didn't know horses did that. So I couldn't reconcile. I go, okay, well, we euthanized her, and yes, we stopped the pain, but she died in the sympathetic nervous system, which is she was fighting. And I thought, you know what, how can we do a peaceful death? Can we bring peace? Even if we decide to euthanize, can we bring peace? And so I started doing research into hospice, and that went into the natural dying process. And it was eye-opening because I'd never heard of this, of doing anything like hospice for a horse. So I'm going to share just a little bit about the natural dying process. And the reason I share this is because the natural dying process very often by well-meaning veterinarians gets labeled as painful, and it's actually not painful. And then people euthanize horses for perceived pain when there's actually no pain going on. So I just want to share a little bit about it, and just share that there is another option, end of life for our horses, and it's called hospice care and natural death. And it is possible. And not all horses have to be euthanized. But I will say educating yourself on the natural dying process will really help understand what it looks like when you see it, so that you don't have to be afraid. And then you have more tools and more information to make any decisions that you need to make. If you decide that you still need to euthanize your horse, that's okay. But there's also times where the horse actually is not in pain, it's just dying, and it's okay to support it through hospice. Okay, so the natural dying process, in general, it's not painful. And if there is pain going on, it's typically due to a painful medical condition. And a brief overview of some of the stages of dying are stopping eating. That will happen in the last week or so. Stopping drinking will happen in the last 2 days. They'll lose muscle tone during this time. Also, they'll have a withdrawal of attention from the immediate environment. And the reason I bring up these parts of the dying process is because when I talk to people who've euthanized their horses and they said, oh, it was time because the horse told me, they tell me these things. They said, oh, they stopped eating. Oh, they stopped drinking. Oh, they're like not here anymore. They seem sad. And I'm hearing them speak and I'm going, oh my gosh, the horse is just dying and it's not painful, but they don't know that. And so then they go through the heartache of euthanizing their horse, thinking the horse is in pain when it's really not. So I just share this so that people can start to understand what the natural dying process looks like. And if you want more information on that or curious about hospice care, it's on my website. Under the resources tab, there's a death and dying page there. Okay, so to wrap up in say the next 5 minutes, these are just a handful of my top things that are my favorite things for senior horses. So this horse, I didn't want to do fly spray all the time, and the midges would itch his belly. And so I thought, you know, if you're a wild horse, you go roll in a mud pit, get mud on you, and there's your fly protection. So I started looking for dirt on the property, add a little water, make some mud, and put it on his belly. He loved it. The bugs totally stayed off of him. It was cooling to him. And then if he went for a roll, it would just naturally rub off by the next day. And then I would just put it on again. And so I love just putting mud on the belly of a horse in, you know, dusk and dawn when those midges can sometimes bother them. And it's non-toxic and it worked beautifully. Okay. Azomite is a clay. And when you add a little bit of water to it, it can make a mud. And you could put it on the pasterns of a horse. If it's winter time and it's wet and muddy and you don't want scratches to develop on the pasterns, you can put azomite on wet pasterns, and within an hour or two, it will dry. The clay will actually dry. It is wonderful for drying out the hair, and then it just dusts off. Soaker boots. I love soaker boots. Soaking feet in Epsom salts. It has a drying capability. So once I had a horse that had an abrasion on the back of the hoof by the frog, and it was hard to get to. So I thought, let me just put him in soaker boots with some Epsom salts and see what happens. And then it worked beautifully. And then I wasn't worried about that part of his foot being dirty, and then was able to heal. And then for treating thrush, I dilute in a bottle of castor oil, say a couple ounces, a few drops of tea tree oil, essential oil, and lavender essential oil. And it works great for thrush. It keeps thrush at bay, and I I put it in a squirt bottle with a little squirt tip, and then I just can squirt it into the crevices of the foot if I see thrush starting to develop. Okay, so don't be alarmed by this needle here. That was done by an acupuncture vet. But this is the point. It is a point for pain, and you can pinch it with your fingertips. And I have, in an emergency, you can use this point. So just pinch it with your fingertips. And I once had to get a pain med into a horse, and he wasn't too thrilled about it. And so I thought, okay, well, let me just take a hold of this point on your nose, and it's all cartilage there, and just pinch it. And then he became very still, and he calmed down. And after about 10 minutes, he let me give the oral pain medication. So this point on the nose, on the nostril there, I love it if I'm ever in an emergency and I'm trying to help with pain. Okay. This is, you can see in the bottom of the screen, this is pea gravel. I love pea gravel because a horse's foot sinks into it and it stimulates the frog. And I kept all my horses barefoot. And I noticed that when they were walking through pea gravel, after a couple months of that, their frogs got plumper. And so the health of the foot improved in pea gravel. So I love pea gravel. And I also found my horses love to roll in the pea gravel. Okay, so here's the summary of those favorite miscellaneous things that I love for horses. Okay, and then let me go to this last one. So we'll end with this, and I'm going to read a story. This is about deepening our relationship with our senior horses. And okay, now I'm thinking about all my senior horses. All my senior horses have died, and they made this presentation possible. And even this little mare here has died, and they do a lot for us. And I'm sure anyone who has a senior horse knows how much that horse has done for them. And so this story I want to tell is how this next generation can learn to interact with horses in a way that gives to the horse. So here's the story. I've been having regular interactions with a 12-year-old girl and a herd of horses just observing. We would copy the horse's body language from a distance, giving the horse a lot of space, and we would increase the space if their eyes fixed. We would start synchronizing our breathing with the horse at a distance just to see how would the horse respond to us if we tried to synchronize our breathing. And by the end of the third day of doing this, spread out over several weeks, the horse that felt most comfortable with a lot of space one day just stared us down when we were leaving, and he wanted us to come over to him. He then proceeded to give cuddles for the next 20 minutes to this 12-year-old girl. It was all on his terms at his initiation, and she was on cloud 9. She now knows a single blink of the eye means something. She now knows, this old girl, that a shift of the weight means something. One tiny step means something. Yes, horses can read our bodies so well that every thought or emotion we experience is telegraphed through our body. Dreams, telepathy, etc., are all par for the course with horses the longer we observe them. She and I, this little girl and I, even joked about synchronizing our nervous systems with the horse and how the herd moves as one cohesive unit, and we can integrate with it. The first time she came, it was raining, but that did not deter her. We sat under cover during the downpour, eating our lunch, and then afterwards, this rainbow appeared. I told her that is why I come no matter the weather. You never know when you'll receive an unexpected gift. It feels great to share with her what I've learned over the 15 years as an adult, and this gets to be her starting place with horses. Who knows what she will learn over her lifetime? So twice monthly, I would have interactions with a herd of horses with this 12-year-old girl. And she's learning how to read the body language. She's learning how to differentiate between her desires as a human to touch and hug them and the horse's desires for space and no touch. After shoveling manure for 1.5 hours and observing herd body language, we found a tree to eat our lunch under. Right away, the mare that was a ways away gave us two eyes and curiosity. There was the invitation. We finished our lunch and meandered her way, but not trying to actually get to her. She responded by showing us the left side of her body, nibbling grass with full eyes and ears on us. We responded by giving her more space, turning away so there was more energetic space for her to move into. That was our invitation to her to come closer to us. This dance went on for quite some time until eventually she decided to close the gap, the horse. But not after being very respectful of our space and making invitations toward us to come closer to her. Quiet, peaceful moments followed, and it ended with this paint mare, actually on this day in these photos, coming over to this little girl and tucking her head right in between the side of her body and her arm and just rested right there. And when I asked this little girl, I said, "What was your favorite thing?" And she said it was this connecting with the horse, but it was the horse connecting with her, because when she came on the property, she says, "Oh, can we go pet the horses?" I said, "Okay, how about we go interact with the horses and invite them to come connect with us?" And that's exactly what this paint mare did. And that was something that this little girl didn't know, that a horse could do that. And so that so moved her. So in closing today, gosh, okay, guys, I just cry over senior horses and what they do for us. But in closing, I just want to say thank you for taking care of your senior horses. Thank you for doing the best that you know how to do. And I hope that everything I've shared with you today, that there's something in there that can help deepen your relationship with your senior horses. Okay, so here, so everything much of what I talked about today on my website, seniorhorserehab.com, under the resources tab, there are 5 different pages that have tons of information. So general resources, feeding tips, arthritis, diarrhea, and then death and dying. And so so it's free. You can just go there and everything's written out. And then also we have classes on hospice care for horses, if you're curious about that, and pain management. And that concludes the talk today. Thank you everyone for listening, and here's to your senior horses.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Mary, and just really thank you for sharing that beautiful story. And I know, I know, I know exactly how you felt in that moment. I've had similar experiences, as a kid and with the next generation, absolutely. One person who joined did send you a hug.
Oh, it's funny, I mean, yeah, I have joy over all my horses. I'm not sad about them, but they're horses. They move us, So, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, if anyone has any questions, we could put them in the Q&A. Um, yeah, no, Mary, there are definitely parallels. I'm thinking of like climate, of where you live
Yeah,
in Washington. And I think in our intro meeting, you and I had discussed this a little bit, that Maine, there are some winters like with the wind chill, like we can get, I saw -40. So there are some things that are super similar. It's interesting to know that your soils are also selenium deficient, but there are some things too, like the bitter cold and the winds that
right, right.
they're totally different. And I know when I was caring for my senior at the time, um, I have the same stance on blankets as you.
Yeah.
And I'm looking out my window. I have a filly. She doesn't like to stay in the pasture, and my
Yeah.
husband's trying to catch her with a bucket of grain. Oh my gosh. Sorry. But my old senior, he was a fjord, pretty rugged in the winter time, but even like with supplementation and all the things he mentioned to sustain his weight, just the winters, it would really get him. So I ended up kind of increasing my blanketing regimen, and I was on it. And it is work, like you mentioned, just like regulating the shifts of temperature.
Yeah.
Um, but and I am not seeing any questions in the chat. I think I will probably stop the recording.